Hello and welcome to another review video. This time around I'll be taking a look at the Hunter x Hunter collab. This collab and Demon Slayer brought two really strong leaders that remain meta in JP, Muichiro and Pitou. And while Pitou is arguably stronger, I think generally Demon Slayer was a much better ramp to roll in because he had much more useful equips than Hunter x Hunter, and these tend to age better than units. That being said, I still think it's probably worthwhile to do some rolls. Apart from Pitou, there's some pretty decent supporting units and equips for future team building, but mostly for dark-based teams, which will in the near future be getting another strong leader, Goten. Feel free to share in the comments below if I missed something, maybe I underrated or overrated something, and also remember to like and subscribe for more path content. Alright, let's start off with a quick speed round of the more lackluster units. Finks doesn't offer much. He has a horrible active skill, and he does have a lot of crosses to deal with blind skyfall, but this is frankly overkill. His equip has a decent mix of awakenings, but it also doesn't offer much awakening-wise. Pakunada surprisingly has a high damage multiplier with the 3-color plus super awakening. Her active skill is not bad to recover from various enemy debuffs, but it sucks she doesn't handle awoken binds. She could have been a really strong cleric for rainbow teams. You can still make her work though, if you have a different cleric in the team, but that's asking for a lot. Her equip has no bulk nor effective skill boost, and an active skill that's probably gonna be covered already by a dedicated sub. Honestly, she's one of the better 6 stars, if you like rainbow teams. Bono Level Up has a looping spinner active skill, which is mostly useful in rainbow teams, and he also covers wood attribute, which sometimes is a pain to fit for some rainbow teams. Unfortunately, the active skill takes away a color, and it doesn't even give you a time buff, so it'll be difficult to go for something like 5 attribute matches. His equip does offer 3 effective skill boosts at 7C and 2 extra seconds of move time, so it's not that bad for a low rarity unit, even though it doesn't offer any bulk. Franklin offers a decent amount of utility, but his active skill isn't that good. It doesn't give nearly enough orbs to make boxes, so you'll have to bring more orb changers if you want to use him in a red PvP team. Still, you could make a broken team with 6 Franklins to make a box and 1 fire combo every turn, or just stray most of them away and keep a few as equips because those equips awakenings and active skill aren't that bad. Both Leorio and his equip are pretty bad. The most use you'll get out of him will be as a leader for New Year Norris teams in the Hunter x Hunter dungeons. And speaking of which, the Chimera Ant dungeon is a very good place to quickly farm XP. In co-op, with dual experience boost leaders, you can get around 81 million experience in less than 2 minutes. That's about 55 runs, or 2 hours to get from rank 1 to rank 1000, and only about 400 runs, or 14 hours to get from 1000 to 1100. With that special spinner, Kaluto seems like she could work in a Daki team, but Daki's just waiting for bartending Toka to arrive to be meta, and by then, you won't need Kaluto since bartending Toka has a Pierce active of her own. She could also work on Pitou teams to help Pierce and recover assist, but Pitou usually runs BDP equips to deal with void damage shields. Her equip is the second one with a cross and a full blind resist, so it could work okay on dark teams, even though it has less effective skill boost than this equip. Ubonik has a classic high damage multiplier that requires you to make a box and a break, so he's gonna be very orb hungry if you want to take full advantage of his damage potential, but that's way too much to ask for. He could work as a quick board expander, but there's better alternatives out there, including this farmable that can also work to recover assist. His equip is not that interesting awakening wise, but could be nice in very niche situations, since the active is 100% damage reduction shield and an Omni shield negate. Phaeton maybe has a lot of hidden potential, but probably not. What I mean by this is that he has a decent damage multiplier in Sun dungeons. Units with the Moon Awakening really shine in UN6, since it was a Moon dungeon, so maybe when we get a new Sun endgame dungeon, Phaeton might become viable. But knowing how the game works, Gonho is just going to release a new Sun unit to tackle those specific dungeons. Phaeton's equip gives a decent damage multiplier, but almost no teams use those 50% HP or below awakenings, except maybe the UN6 boss or Ordeal Metatron. So overall, maybe Phaeton is a hidden gem that could really shine in the future, but probably not. I would still try to keep all my copies of Phaeton, if possible, and not exchange them away, just in case. These 2 units are okay for farming non-supergravity dungeons. Nobunaga is a cheap 3-unit system, but the active has 3 animations, so it's gonna feel very slow. Shizuko is better as a one-off, since she's a no Skyfall leader, and her active skill is not a system, so you'll be running one at most in swipe teams, unless they're really short. Both of their equips are not that special though, unless you really need to include some of these resists in a team and have no other options. Cortopi has a lot of utility, but their active skill is somewhat unreliable for orb generation. He does have a leader skill that boosts egg drops though, and there's a good chance of pulling them since they are low rarity. So if you don't have any of the other 4 units with this type of leader skill, he's not a bad unit to get 2 of. His equip is another one with 2 full resist, but overall I am not a big fan of the combination of awakenings and active skill. Mac is a really solid cleric, as she has a bunch of utility and her active skill also has a delay, which could be useful at times. But if you don't care about the delay, you might have better cleric options with better stats, skill bind resist, or more hard OEs. Her equip awakenings are bad, but at least it's a 2-turn delay. Overall, Mac is a pretty well optimized cleric, and she's also a low rarity unit, so there's a good chance of getting 1. You might have better options, but it's not a bad idea to keep her in mind when team building. Kurapika unfortunately didn't get a good buff. To get him to actually do some damage in super gravity dungeons, you'll have to match 3 or more attributes with a BDP. That's way too much to ask for. They would have been better if they had gotten a defense break awakening with more 3, 4, or 5 color match awakenings. Their leader skill isn't that bad, since it's easy to activate and gives both FUA and bonus combos. They could work okay for new players trying out 3 color or rainbow teams. His equip would work really well on himself, since it gives more damage and the defense break awakening he needs for new dungeons. But there's better options out there, and you might already have either of these since they are GFEs. Killua is an orb skin unit, and I think he also got the short end of the stick when it comes to buffs, so I don't see the need to buy the bundle if you didn't manage to roll him. He got buffed into being a looping shield if you choose to transform every possible chance, but the slightly more interesting way to use him is to keep him on his last transformation, since he gives you 6 bonus combos, which I think is the highest number of combos a unit can give you, but only if you exclude units like Kurotobi who scale combos. In this form, I guess you could also make him work as a looping shield with something like Crusader Shield, or make him into an auto healer with Pitou's equip, but it's a pain to fully transform him since you'll have to do it twice, and he doesn't charge or delay in his base and second form active. He also doesn't break his own damage cap, so that's yet another downside. His equip does give you 4 effective skill boosts and a cross, but it really sucks that this bundle unit didn't get a nicer buff in his equip or his base form. This equip could either use more effective skill boosts or some team HPs to make it more appealing. Before touching on the REM units, I'll briefly talk about Illumi, who you can exchange for with 5 black medals. I think Gonho has been giving this out a lot more lately, so hopefully this will be an easy trade for most of you. Illumi is a pretty strong dark unit that I think is worth the 5 black medals. He can not only serve as a decent dark PvP sub due to his decent damage multiplier and skill, but he kinda also works as a leader since his leader skill gives both 4 bonus combos and follow-up damage, which is pretty rare on a non-transforming unit, as I could only find a handful of comparable units. And save for melee, these are all REM exclusive units. Illumi brings a lot of unique things to the table, like being one of the few units who create nail orbs. He can also take the roulette clear Layton since he has a Pana clear plus awakening, so he is capable of clearing 10 turns of roulettes with a row of hard orbs. His equip is solid too, but not that special. I'm not a fan of the low cooldown active skill, but it could come in handy. I would try to get at least 1 copy of Illumi if you like dark teams, or if you want to pull some refresh shenanigans with nail orbs. Now onto the better REM units. First up is Shalnark, who's honestly pretty underwhelming as a unit. His base cooldown is way too long, though 27 turns seems to be on the low end for new transform units, and he doesn't bring that much to the table post-transformation. He has a pretty good damage multiplier, but having no damage cap break really holds him back since that's a necessity for all the new high defense enemies. He kinda works as an asymmetrical pair for Netero, since Shalnark has FUA and bonus combos in his leader skill, but if you're running 3 Neteros in a team, Shalnark's generation active feels like overkill since you're gonna have 4 orb changers. I guess the damage spike could be useful to clear debuffs, but there's other units with spikes that also have more useful effects, such as a cleric and a looping shield. His equip is okay due to having 5 effective skill boosts, but it only gives you 500 HP, so it doesn't add that much bulk. There's much better options out there unless you really need those team RCBs or the balance killer. Gonho just announced the first 8 effective skill boost equip, and even though this is gonna be over 2 months away for us in NA, I'll continue to expect better from 2 skill boost equips like this one. Next is Youpi. He is one of the new 7 stars, and he's the second unit to have 6 10Cs, with the first one being Kano and Kuron. He's able to take advantage of his high damage multiplier by being able to break his damage cap. I do wish it were higher than 5 billion, at least 6 billion would have been cool to at least match with Kano and Kuron, but I guess that's the dark unit tax, as both dark and light attribute do not have disadvantages against the other attributes. Youpi is a really solid unit, as he has one of the traditionally essential actives, attribute and damage absorption voids, that also tackles attack debuffs. Him having his second attribute be fire also means that you can change it with an equip to dark to do up to 18 billion dark damage, so he could work really well in dark teams. Even though he is really strong, I kinda don't see him being used that much. Pitou and Goten teams already require a lot of skill boost and pretty much deal enough damage of their own, so trying to fit Youpi in a team is probably pretty hard since he also has a long base cooldown active and he doesn't bring a lot of skill boost to the team. It doesn't help that Youpi doesn't offer much utility post-transformation. I understand 10Cs is a lot of damage already, but those could have been compressed and Youpi could have been given some OEs, I don't know. Just something to make him more useful. His equip is not that special. It can be a really good source of damage, but those killers aren't as good as dragon or devil killers, and the equip doesn't offer any bulk or more effective skill boost. Still, Youpi's equip is very solid if you can fit it in a team. Chrollo is one of the few units capable of leader swapping other units, but nowadays he faces more competition, especially from units that can leader swap ASAP, like Fastcat and Pouf. At the very least, Chrollo has 6 effective skill boosts in his base form, so if you don't have enough skill boosts to make the previously mentioned units work, then maybe Chrollo might not be that bad, but you're still gonna have to fully transform him and probably wait a few turns to leader swap. Once fully transformed, he has a good amount of utility with his crosses and Ls, and with his damage cap break, he could pull his own weight damage-wise in some dark teams. His equip is decent enough for stacking dungeon boosts, as the cooldown is long enough as to not overcharge units like Camilla. So if you don't care about the active skill, this is just like most of the other dungeon boost equips, and therefore not that special. Having Chrollo also grants you access to the free Colosseum equip, which is pretty solid as it has 5 effective skill boosts, 1 team HP awakening, and full unbind and jammer resist. Definitely try to grab this one if you can, and you don't necessarily need to have this Chrollo to get it, as you could use the Chrollo from the old Rem to clear the Colosseum and get the equip in your mail. And I guess I'll quickly address the old Rem units. If you do a 5-pull in Hunter x Hunter, you will get a 5-pull in your mail for the old Hunter x Hunter machine, but all of the old units are pretty much completely useless, with Chrollo being the only exception since you can get a pretty good equip with him. So if you don't have the Chrollo from the new machine and you were planning on rolling anyways, it's better to do multi-pulls to increase your chances of getting Chrollo and therefore this equip. But if you don't plan on rolling much in this machine, but still care about this equip, wait until all the free stamp rolls are over. We'll be getting 3 memorial rolls from the new Rem and a total of 6 pulls from the old Rem, and supposedly Chrollo, the old one, has a pull rate of around 10%. Even though I think all of the units from the old Rem are pretty useless and they'll just be taking up box space, you should keep them around, because who knows, maybe next rerun you'll be able to exchange these old units for something maybe? I don't know. It's unlikely, but now I feel obligated to keep old Rem, or I guess Rem adjacent in this case. Next is Kite, who's another transforming unit that has a decent damage multiplier, but as with Shalnark, he suffers from not having a cap breaking active. I'm also not the biggest fan of his orb generation active, as it is possible, depending on your board, for one of his forms to not give you enough orbs to activate Kite's leader skill. But at the very least, as a leader, he has 5 effective skill boosts and gives 10 million follow-up damage, which is significant to deal with some spawns that have a 1% HP super assault. Unfortunately, things may get a little dicey when it comes to dealing with gravities, since his leader skill only reduces damage by 30%. So with double kites, a gravity larger than 300% means certain that Kite does have 4 equips, so maybe you'll be able to find a use for at least one of them. The first equip is one of many, with 2 team HPs and 2 team RCBs, and at least this one has a cross, but it doesn't have any effective skill boosts like this one, so if you don't care for the Dark Taco and the plus attack awakening, I would find it hard to justify using Kite's equip over this one. His second equip does have a skill boost and 3 killers, but the active is kinda useless, and honestly it isn't as good as this equip, since this one has the same killers and effectively 1 more skill boost. His third equip is alright. While it doesn't have more than 2 effective skill boosts, nor does it have the bulk awakenings I'm expecting from 2 skill boost equips, it does give a pretty good damage boost, especially for units like Pitou, who usually needs an equip with a good amount of skill boost and a box awakening. His fourth and new equip is a pretty decent Tensi equip, as it does give 2 effective skill boosts, 1 team HP, and full poison resist. But I don't value poison resist as highly as I value jammer resist, since the latter one also resists bombs. So while I think this equip could have been better, it's still pretty solid overall. Next is God, who has some pretty interesting uses with this 40% true gravity, but there's a limited number of dungeons where you can take advantage of this without dying right away. Nowadays, he's mostly used as a New Year Norris leader or to troll people in 3P. He can also be used for time challenges like titles and level 15s, but it's gonna be a pain to track him in a dungeon until he actually becomes useful, as he could be equipped with a looping shield or an auto heal equip. So again, niche uses you probably won't care about. His equip isn't that bad. It's 4 effective skill boosts with 2 team HPs, a skill bind resist, and a 3 green draw awakening, which is gonna be pretty useless almost all the time. It might not be the worst idea to exchange for one if you didn't draw a copy and you find value in his 40% true gravity. Meruem is also an exchangeable unit, but with much more immediate uses than Gon, as he can pair very well with or serve as a sub in Pitou teams. Just like Gon, he's also a 2 transformation unit, but his first 2 actives actually do something, as they are useful for stalling and hasting up other units. As I mentioned, he works really well in Pitou teams, but you could make a full system with 3 copies of himself. Obviously, it's much less powerful than a full Pitou system, but maybe you get 2 or 3 copies of him last run and you feel less inclined to pull for Pitou, and you could always pair with a Pitou friend. I'll talk more about Pitou later, but the reason Meruem works well with Pitou is his final active skill that generates dark, poison, and heal orbs. It also generates wood orbs, but you're probably not gonna care about them, even in pure Meruem teams, since to maximize your damage, you should be aiming to change Meruem's sub-attribute to dark. Meruem's equip is really solid as well. 9 turns of attribute absorption is the longest duration in the game, which might be overkill but can be pretty neat in some dungeons, especially in some of the monthly quests. The equip also gives your roulette 3 team HPs and a move time buff that also lasts for 9 turns. Meruem is a pretty strong unit and equip, and should probably be higher than Gon on your exchange priority list if you want to play with Pitou, but only roll 1 or no copies of him. But I wouldn't stress over Meruem if you roll 2 or more copies of Pitou. Next is the new BGM unit, Netero. He's another 3 unit system that has a high damage multiplier, generates a consistent board, and breaks their damage cap. In that sense, he's similar to Muichiro and Pitou, but honestly he's not as good as those other 2. Unlike Muichiro, he doesn't have a BDP, so you'll be forced to bring along a unit with a Pierce active, which further limits your team building flexibility. Or you'll be forced to use an equip with a box. If you rolled in Demon Slayer, you might have a few Zenitsus ready to use, as it's one of the best equips you could put on Netero, since it gives you a box and also a light sub-attribute. Unfortunately, he requires 3 light combos to do big damage, so after using Netero's active, you'll have to rely on a roulette or another orb changer to make a box, plus another 2 light combos. With 3 of him, you'll be expanding your board every turn, so you could hope for 5 or more light orbs to be generated from the board expansion, but Netero's active can and probably will override your light orbs to turn them into hard or light again. So if you give up on using a BDP equip and want to go for pure light combos, you'll have to look for a decent light pierce unit. Usually the best option is the marbles, since they do a lot of damage and also handle damage absorption voids. But we're not getting marble, so that's another L for Netero. Netero also doesn't really have an asymmetrical pairing, like how Muichiro has near Watatsumi, that complements him very well. Mainly you'll want to have someone that gives you follow-up damage, and there's not that many good options out there. I did mention Shalnark, but yeah, he's not that good. Netero does give you enough heal orbs to make a column for follow-up damage, and a heal GPA to hopefully heal enough. But if you add Torn Orbs and RCB debuffs to the equation, things will start to look very dire. His equip is not the worst. 2 effective skill boosts, 2 team HP, and 2 full resist is pretty solid. But honestly, it's easily replaceable, especially in this day and age where you are fully or almost fully board changing every turn, so that full poison resist isn't as valuable in my opinion. If anything, it kinda counters negative orbs, since once turned to poison and then changed to a different orb removes the orb debuff. I still value jammer resist because a bomb or 2 remaining after someone like Akasa's active could be pretty devastating, but I digress. I don't really think chasing a Netero system is the best idea. He's too inconsistent and annoying to build with, and his equip is not that unique. That being said, he does have a large damage multiplier, and he could serve as a board expander and a move time buffer, so he could be useful if you have absolutely no one else who solves those issues, or if you need his damage to one-shot certain spawns. I'm actually interested to know if people who usually buy bundles will skip this one. I would, since I don't see the value of him as a system or as a one-off. To this day in JP, he still doesn't really have a good partner, so he's gonna fall out of fashion pretty quickly. Zeno and Silva is the new 10-to-1 collab exchange. As a unit, they're not the best. Since they don't really do that much damage, they do generate a good deal of Dark Orbs though, and you can create a system with 3 of them. They kinda work similar to Noah, but without the haste. Zeno and Silva are mainly used for their equip, as it goes really well on dark units like Meruem and the future GFE Goten. Speaking of, Goten's equip is much better, but if you're rolling a good amount in Hunter x Hunter, you'll probably gather up enough trade fodder for Zeno and Silva, and with Goten, you'll have to get lucky and roll him in a Super Gadfest. Overall, this is a good pull and a worthwhile trade, so it's not a bad idea to at least pick up one if you don't roll one, especially if you like dark combo teams. Hisoka is not a new unit, but he got really nice buff, so he's pretty strong. His base form is a decent solution for damage and attribute absorption shield voiding, but his active skill cooldown is a bit too long. The average cooldown for this sort of active skill is about 7 turns, but Hisoka's delay and board expansion make it so that his cooldown has to be raised, otherwise it'd be simply too good. So to use him, you might have to time using his skills, since most spawns kill you after something like 6 turns, so it'll be impossible to stall for his active again if it was recently used. Hisoka does a pretty decent amount of damage and has solid utility, as he can have up to 6 skill boosts or 4 skill boosts plus a full blind resist, or he can bring a little more HP with the old stats boost awakening. But if you don't need that utility, you can take up the box super awakening and do an even better amount of damage. Right now, red BDP teams aren't really a thing, especially since Spidey and Venom and Scarlet Witch are not in the game. In the near future, Light should arrive, and he's a pretty strong red BDP leader that, due to being exchangeable like Zeno and Silva, will be very accessible. Hisoka's Evo is also very useful in Lyle teams, but honestly he's useful for any team that you can fit him in, since he has a ton of utility. For some dungeons, it's very nice to have a unit with tape resist, since there's possibilities of spawns removing assist and then having the same spawn or the next one keep tape. The UN6 boss will do those things simultaneously, so this Hisoka can be a pretty good counter for that. Hisoka also has a double L to recover assist and a double cross to deal with blind skyfall, and not to mention this form can also have the full blind resist or the old stat boost super awakening. This Evo's leader skill is also decent for Lyle, since he also gives you a 7x6 board. Hisoka's equip isn't that good though, they all can't be winners. 3 skill bind resist is overkill in my opinion, and if you're playing with only 40% skill bind resist across all your units, you are living a crazy life, but I guess this equip is a lifesaver in that case. There's better equips out there with 2 team HPs and a cross. This one comes to mind again. Overall, Hisoka is a pretty strong support unit and should age nicely if you care for Lyle. And I thought Hisoka had a lot of utility, but in comes Pouf, who is all about support with his blind, cloud, and tape resist. Not only that, but he also has 3 different attributes, a double cross and a double L to handle other hazards in any teams that use at least one of those attributes. He's kinda similar to Fasca in the sense that after swapping your leader with a sub, his active skill becomes something more useful, unlike someone like Toto. His post-transformation active skill is more in demand nowadays, since board shrinks and RCB debuffs are more commonplace and can be pretty deadly for a lot of teams. The only downside to Pouf is his extremely long base cooldown, and the fact that he only brings 2 skill boosts to the team. But honestly he does so much already, so I'll get off his back, especially because his active skill also has the most broken buff out there, the one that guarantees certain victory, Skyfall prediction for 1 turn. I don't think I need to say more. But he does have an equip, so I do need to address it. It's pretty good too. There's a bunch of 3 team HP equips out there, so this doesn't really stand out unless you really need that skill bind resist. The extra fingers are nice too, but the L doesn't really matter on an equip. Honestly, if you don't care for Pitou, Pouf is the highlight of the collab, even though some teams won't really have room for him or don't care about leader swapping. I would really want to get 1 copy of him. And finally Pitou, who will stay as one of the strongest leaders for the near future. Obviously this all depends on what you have in your monster box, but compared to Muichiro, making a Pitou team might be easier since you're not required to have 2 or more copies of a BGM unit. Here's an updated graphic I've shared before that has the typical teams for both leaders. Again, it's all box dependent, but it seems to me that Pitou teams are generally easier to build with and have a lot of possible replacements, the most important of which is the orb generator replacement. Even though Pitou's pull rate is twice that of Muichiro's, maybe you won't be able to pull 2 or more copies of Pitou, but hopefully you get 1 copy and enough trade fodder to possibly exchange for Meruem, and you'll be pretty much set with the Pitou system. But what makes Pitou a great leader? Well, everything on her kit. Their leader skill gives you fixed move time, so as to never worry about time debuffs, 5 bonus combos is just plain great, and the combination of all stat boosts for Dark and damage reduction allow you to live through raw HP checks, and gravity is larger than 450%, assuming you're also running a looping shield sub. The leader skill does have some shortcomings, but honestly these aren't that bad. For one, Pitou doesn't have Fua in their leader skill, so you'll either have to run an equip with follow-up or pair with Meruem who has Fua in his leader skill. Also, she doesn't void poison damage, so things could get dicey if you're unable to heal enough. Thankfully, Pitou's active skill pretty much solved these problems. In a normal 6x5 board, they give you enough orbs to do a hard column, to do follow-up damage, and to also make a heal TPA. Then, she also gives you an RCB boost and has 2 heal TPA plus awakenings, so healing won't be an issue at all. And there's more. While her personal damage multiplier isn't that amazing, the active skill also gives her an effective 4x multiplier and a damage cap break to fully take advantage of her total damage potential. And there's even more. A 3 Pitou system will have 2 of them damage cap broken and attack buffed at any point in time, which will let you output around 36 billion damage versus Muichiro's 33 billion every turn. The only missing thing from Pitou teams is a void damage piercer. Unlike Muichiro, Pitou doesn't have a box awakening, so you'll either have to bring in a sub with that active skill or put an equip with the box on Pitou. Every team slot is precious in 3 unit systems, so the optimal way to go with Pitou is to put a box equip on them. The best in slot equip is this one, which is the BGM unit of the Praise of Tennis collab. This one gives Pitou a box, follow-up damage, and a Dark Sub-Attribute Change Awakening, which raises Pitou's sub-attribute damage from 10% of their main attribute damage to 15%. I don't know if a lot of people roll or bought the BGM, so if you have Kazuya and Pitou, put up this monstrosity as your first or second leader to help out your unlucky friends. But most importantly, put them up to show off your luck and or disposable income. Pitou does have the same weakness as Muichiro, 5x4 boards. In these, Pitou's active skill will spawn 9 Dark Orbs, 9 Heal Orbs, and only 2 Poison Orbs, since there's only 9 orbs in the board. Being unable to activate your leader skill damage reduction is basically a death sentence in all endgame dungeons. Therefore, some of your subs should also fake spore shrinks, so keep that in mind when team building. I have mentioned Pitou's equips here and there. It is pretty nice to turn a low cooldown unit into an auto healer or cleric. I have mentioned before that this works well on units like Tanjiro and Kinshen in Valentine Noah teams, or on someone like Gon. But if you're like me and you skip Valentine Noah, you have less of a reason to pull for a single Pitou if you don't care for the system, or for more dupes of Pitou if you do care. Honestly, this could work really well in future teams, but there's also a chance of being quickly power crept. But like I said, Pitou's here to stay for at least the next 2 months, so it's not the worst idea to pull for them if you want to add another strong leader to your arsenal. In short, this collab is really solid, but not as exciting as Demon Slayer. I actually gave Demon Slayer the same chase rate, so I feel like I should be equally excited. But since there's not much dupe value outside a few units, I don't think the incentive to roll here is as big as it was in Demon Slayer. Maybe I should stop with the Demon Slayer comparison, because Hunter x Hunter is a very solid collaboration. However, there's still some pretty good upcoming events, primarily bartenders, so keep that in mind. Hunter x Hunter is kind of a self-contained collab. Units like Pitou and Netero aren't really used in other teams, so if you rather roll in bartenders because you get a few Dakis and want to play with bartending Toka and don't have a lot of magic stones, I would skip this collab since Big Toka is basically exchangeable for 70 stones. But what do you think? Will you be rolling a lot here? Personally, I will try to get a copy of Pouf. I have rolled in the past run and have a few Meruems and a Hisoka, and I managed to roll a Muichiro team, so I don't feel like chasing multiple copies of Pitou. It would be a nice surprise though. If you decide to roll, I wish you the best of luck. I'll see you guys next time. And sorry that this video ran a little bit longer than usual. There were just so many units. Okay, goodbye.